Hey class, this is Professor Bankert here, going to talk a little bit about glittering vices, just a response to some of the posts. Some things I've been thinking about a little bit. I think that vice is just completely prevalent in our lives as individuals and as a culture in the US, which often means we don't recognize them as vices. We don't think there's anything wrong. We just sort of go about our day, and we don't even feel a twinge of conscience or guilt, like I should be changing some of this or maybe doing something differently. And so I want to address that a little bit. For those who have ever seen the movie Seven, it's really, really rated R, and if you don't like that sort of thing, don't watch it. Towards the end, there's a character who sort of makes the same claim, We call these people innocent, but who's really innocent when you look at the world where it's just lust is just everywhere. It's expected. It's at the grocery store checkout, in the magazines, and my 4-year-old is going to grow up in that environment. And not only is it's gluttony, it's lust, it's all right there. It's greed, sloth. And so, as a result, I want to take the time to have a text like this maybe speak into our lives, my life as well. What kinds of careers do we really want to have? What kinds of things do I want, as a Christian, do I want to shape me? Because if I'm spending 50 hours a week doing something, that's going to have a profound influence on my life. We've already talked about habits shape virtues and character. Well, the same thing, habits also shape vices and lack of character. And we're going to learn about in the final week of the course about how habits affect the brain, which leads to sort of the way we feel, the natural ways in which we respond. So if I am in an occupation where I'm being formed in a particular environment, that it can be a good formative experience or a very bad formative experience. And we need to take this seriously. And so I just have some examples, like what if my daughter wants to be a ballerina and she's really good at it, and it gets to a place, right, high school, college, where everything is about you cannot weigh over a certain amount, you have to watch every single thing that you eat. This is the way it sort of has to work if you want to compete at these levels. At some point, that's nothing but gluttony. It's a complete focus about food and what I consume and what I can't consume, and about this notion of control, misdirected forms of pleasure and whatnot. And I think that's malforming that kind of hyper-intense environment. You can say that about lots of competitive things, whether that's sports, other environments. At a certain level, it becomes so much about winning, so much about excelling, that it becomes malformative. It plays on things like anger and envy and competition. And I think we need to be careful what we surround ourselves with. I have friends who wait to go to the gym at certain times because there's more people there and good-looking women and whatnot. Lust, and we put ourselves in environments to play on that. There are many jobs. If you're in a high-paying job, there's many jobs that it's just you're going to work 70 hours a week. It's expected. Some of you pastors, it's expected of you. If you're a lawyer, if you're in the stock market, if you're doing these things, just that's it. If you don't work 70 hours a week, they'll just find someone who will. It's like a new normal, right? Look, whatever happened to 40 hours, gone. Well, that's sloth. I work all the time, but I've got no time for relationships. I'm lazy in love. Should I be in an environment like that? Should I put myself into an environment that is so malforming? I've got some friends who are, software salesmen, and their whole life is meeting the next quota, and it's so hard because greed, the kind of car they drive, they can't sell people driving a normal car because it looks really bad. Same thing with the clothes they wear, the watch they have. In order to sell the high school software they're selling, they've got to have a certain image, which means they have to sort of be involved in this culture that tells you more is better. And greed is a big part of that. Should we be putting ourselves into these scenarios? Or should we say, I refuse? My character is eternal. I'm here to prepare myself for the coming kingdom of God, and I will not subject myself to an environment like that day after day because I can't fight it. The vices are so natural to us. If I'm in an environment where this is part of it, how do I fight against it? If I'm a prison guard, how do I fight against wrath and anger? It's very difficult. And so I think we have to think about these things and talk about these things. I'm not sure. I mean, it's obvious, like, if you're a prostitute, we're like, you shouldn't do that and be a Christian. It's treating yourself as a means to an end. It's horribly degrading. It's playing on lust and this notion of just easy pleasure. You're playing on the vice of others. You shouldn't do it. Obvious. But less obvious are some of these jobs that are playing on vices that we often just deem okay. No problem. You should just go ahead and do it. How many of us are gluttons? I am. Food dominates. Dessert, going out to eat, eating more than I need. It's part of my social setting. That's what we do with our friends, right? When we get a babysitter or something, that's just how it works. And our whole society is about waste. How much food is thrown out in the restaurant industry. How oversized are the portions. And we think nothing of it. And yet, isn't that malforming at some level? So I want to be thinking about these things in my life and really working to reduce the environment that plays on my lust, reducing the environments that play on my overwork, my tendency to be overworking, my sloth, the tendency to be a glutton. And I think we need to take this seriously as Christians. And again, I'm talking to myself as much as anybody because it's just so difficult. But I think we often think it's no problem, right? Like, sure, that's what you should do. And so the Glittering Vices is really, this book has really, it holds a mirror up to me and it helps me look at my life differently and think, well, what can I do to reverse this tendency, right? What can I do to reverse this process? Another thing I wanted to address quickly, the idea of anger and whether or not anger can ever be a good or righteous emotion. And there's some question about this because it seems like Christians are called to love and not to be angry. And yet, DeYoung is going to talk about a golden mean here. That anger that's about revenge, that's violent, that's right in the wrong amount for the wrong reasons is absolutely a vice. But you can have a righteous kind of anger the way God does, and that can be a good thing. And I want to say that I think DeYoung is right here in certain ways, because love can be motivated by lots of different things, loving actions, right? Jesus looks out over Jerusalem and has compassion and cries, right? On Palm Sunday when he's on the Mount of Olives, looking out over the city, knowing it's going to be destroyed in 50 years, weeps, and it motivates him to go down and to live and to show compassion on the cross. But then other times, Jesus is whipping people out of the temple, as DeYoung cites, right? And we assume that this is a loving act, but it's motivated by anger, not compassion. With my own son, sometimes I say I'm sorry because I've hurt him, and my loving action stems from guilt, or my loving action might stem from empathy. But sometimes I'm angry and I say, go to your room, you can't talk to me like that. And I'm trying to love him to say this is unacceptable, but what's motivating is anger. And I think that's okay. A governmental policy that begins to hurt the poor or the homeless can make me angry. That anger can lead me to do mean things to the government, refuse to pay my taxes, say things and whatnot, and be cynical. Bad things. Or that anger at the government might say, well, I got to get involved in the homeless population. I've got to become an advocate for them. I've got to show them love since they're not receiving the justice they deserve from the government. And that would be love motivated by anger. And I think that's okay, right? And so some of that is about how to hit the mean and to understand that anger can drive me to love my neighbor better, to seek justice in more advanced ways, or it can lead me in a negative direction. So just a point of clarity. But I hope this helps. If you have any questions at all, let me know. Let's keep the conversation going. I'll see you guys online.